Nobody ever prepares you for that, to see somebody try and take their eye out, to self-harm or to stick a biro in a vein in your leg until it goes gangrenous and refuse all treatment. Things like that you can't explain to somebody how you deal with it, because you have to deal with it, but you have to deal with it in your own way. And prison officers, they get a bad shout, but they see things on a daily basis most people, don't see in a lifetime. My name's Vanessa Frake. I'm a former prison governor and author of The Governor, which is my life in the prison service. I'm spent 27 years in the prison service. I started as an officer working with females at Holloway, and then I moved to Wormwood Scrubs, went up the ranks and retired in 2013. I wasn't particularly good at school. I got bullied at school. Although now, I'm quite big and tall, at school I was quite small, and I got picked on quite a bit. And it was a difficult time for me. I didn't have any interest in any lessons apart from PE and English. All the rest I was sent to a Catholic school, even though I'm not a Catholic. My mother isn't a Catholic. My father isn't a Catholic. But my mother thought that it would be a better education. So we had nuns at this school. And, they say, nuns used to be quite sadistic. Well, I do believe that. They would mete out, the cane left, right and centre for punitive things. So I hated school. And because I was one of the youngest in my year, I left school at 15 with very few qualifications. I just wanted to leave school as quickly as I could. And then I thought that I wanted to go into the forces. I wanted to go into the Wrens, actually, into the Navy. And then I found out that women were shore-based in those days. They weren't allowed on ships or, to go abroad. And I didn't want to do that. Then that completely put me off. So I happened to be in London one weekend, went to see a show, and I was on the tube and I saw a poster saying that your prison service needs you and you two could make a difference. And I thought, yeah, well, I could do that job. Yeah. What struck me, and nobody had said anything about in training, was about the darker side of prison, was like the self-harm, the attempted suicides, the suicides. Nobody ever prepares you for that, to see somebody try and take their eye out, to self-harm or to stick a biro in a vein in your leg until it goes gangrenous and refuse all treatment. Things like that you can't explain to somebody how you deal with it, because you have to deal with it, but you have to deal with it in your own way. And prison officers, they get a bad shout, but they see things on a daily basis most people, don't see in a lifetime. I can remember the first suicide I saw, and I can remember the last suicide before I saw. The ones in between, no, I can't. They just all blur into one. And I think part of writing the book helped me to address the things like self-harm, the things like suicide, and things like that nobody prepares you for. Nobody prepares you for looking after somebody who has raped their own children, I was always and still am, of the position that, you know, these people have been judged. They've been judged by their peers. They've been judged by a court, and they have been sentenced accordingly. Mine was not to judge them. Mine was to work with them. And hard as though that is, if you can't do that, then you're in the wrong job. So I worked on the hospital wing then. I mean, it was called the hospital wing. Really, it was the psychiatric wing. Love them. And which I've always enjoyed working with people with mental health, always. So my helpers for that day were, one woman was in for arson and trying to murder a nurse. And the other one was in for, well, assisting the rape of her two children. She held their children down while her husband raped them. Now, a lot of people would think that she was worse than he was because they came from her. She born them. A woman's is nurture, nature, childbirth, you know, and to do that to your own children. But I was given these two as helpers to go and fetch the lunch trolley. And I mean, I knew who they were. And when the one who'd abused her children had come in, we'd said to her, "Do not tell anybody what you are in for." We'd offered her the rule, which is segregation for her own protection. She didn't want it. So she was in the hospital wing. And the other one was all right until she felt that she wanted to try and attack you. So, you know, you work with these people and you judge them on a almost a 5-minute basis as to, you know, how they are. And anyways, I took them to the kitchen. And I was just talking to the caterer saying, I'm from C1, come to collect the lunch trolley. And all of a sudden, the woman who abused her children, just her face just slowly like opened like this. And it was in slow motion, just literally the skin started to part. And it was 2 lines because the fire starter on the other side had melted 2 razor blades into a toothbrush, and that's quite common as a weapon to injure prisoners because two razor blades slices like that are much harder to stitch together, so you're always going to have like a massive scar there. And then the next minute, this woman just started screaming and the claret started flowing and, you know, it kind of went all over the baguettes and, you know, it was a bit like, what was that? The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you know, blood was spurting here, there and everywhere. And this one was trying to do a bit more with her. And it was just gone from very calm lunch to just mayhem, blood, everything. And of course, blood is very slippy. when you're on a lilo floor, you just like trying to get your feet is impossible. But you know, one was carted off to get stitched, and the other was carted off to the segregation unit. But things like that happen, and they can happen in the blink of an eye. You know, one minute all is calm, the next minute it's complete carnage. What they've done is monstrous, absolutely. But actually, you know, if you saw Rose West, and I looked after Rose West for 4 or 5 months while she was waiting her trial at Winchester Crown, she was at Holloway, down the seg unit, separated from the general population for obvious reasons. You know, we used to think that she was like your auntie, you know, that you go and see on a Sunday, who plumped the cushions up when you stood up, you know, that sort of person. She used to knit a lot. She was yes, no, thank you, please, not a problem to manage. These people don't have, monster tattooed on their foreheads. It's the mainstream media that projects them as that. And anybody that I've ever talked to who has dealt with the likes of Dennis Nielsen, the Yorkshire Ripper, Huntley, whatever, they're usually fairly compliant. They usually are no problem at all because they've been caught. I only met Myra Hindley briefly. I only met her for I was doing a transfer of prisoners with two other officers. We were taking half a dozen prisoners from Holloway down to Cookham Wood, and Myra worked in the reception area of Cookham Wood. And I didn't know that. I mean, I'd only been in the job maybe a year, maybe a bit less. So I was the most junior officer there. And obviously the junior officer gets the shit job. So I was at the back of the van, right on the wheel hub. So you feel every single bump. But as is customary, when you go to another jail, you're offered a cup of tea or whatever. And they offered me, the senior officer, reception officer offered us a drink. Would you like a drink? We all said yes. And out sort of come shuffling this little old lady. That's all I can describe her as. She had short brown mousy hair. She had an old brown cardigan on with the elbows bare and a denim skirt, and we used to call them jellies. They were made of plastic shoes. And she come shuffling out, asked every single one of us what we wanted, and then went off. And the officer next to me, who was obviously senior to me, said to me, "You know who that was, don't you?" And I went, "No." And she said, "Well, that was Myra Hindley." It's like, yeah, right. Because when I say Myra Hindley, what do you think of? The blonde, the piercing eyes, the evil personified. You wouldn't have known her if you'd have walked past her in the street. And she came back with her 3 mugs of tea and asked us if there was anything else, and off she went. I had no idea who she was, no idea. And obviously, the hairs of the back of your neck stand up a bit because the story of the dreadful story of the Moors murderer. And I had a friend who came from Saddleworth, and she'll tell you even to this day, that runs very deep. What happened, and the fact that they've still not found all the children's bodies. I was at Wakefield Prison. I was going and having a look round there. Now, Wakefield Prison is known as Monster Mansion because it held the likes of Colin Ireland, Dennis Nielsen, the Yorkshire Ripper, the Black Panther, all of these like really serious serial killers. And I actually felt at one time that I loved Wakefield anyways. My nan was from Wakefield, and that I wanted to transfer up to Wakefield. So a friend of mine's father worked at Wakefield, and I asked her to ask him if he'd show me around, and he showed me around Wakefield Prison. And we were in the canteen, and I turned, well, sort of backed up one, and I literally bumped into somebody, and I said, "Oh, so." And then I just kept going up and up and up like that. And then there was this just 6'6" by 6'6" wide guy with these pink eyes, literally pink eyes. And I said to the guy that was taking me around, I said, "I've seen that face." And he went, "That's Colin Ireland." And yeah, I mean, he was a foreboding presence purely by his size. This one prisoner who we always thought had a very strange relationship with his mother, because he would kiss his mother on the lips when she'd come to visit him, and she was very, what I would call, foreboding. It was all about him, and how is my little boy, and things like that. It was a very odd relationship. anyways, I was asked to write this report on him, and I knew that he was in for murder. He murdered his girlfriend. But what I didn't know, because you haven't got time to go into all the ins and outs of every person's offence. What I didn't know was the circumstances of his murder. Now, he claimed it was drug fueled. It may well have been. But basically, he and his girlfriend had taken a load of drugs and watched porn, and then had this argument. He then raped her, and then he put a fist inside her, two fists. I'll leave it to your imagination as to where. Anyways, she started hemorrhaging. He went next door, or he phoned his mother, I think, because he didn't know what to do, didn't call an ambulance. His mother then came round. They let this woman bleed to death. His mother actually was lucky not to get a prison sentence. And then I think eventually his mother called the ambulance, but by that time the girlfriend was dead. But it really just shocked me. I suppose maybe because I'm a female, maybe because I'd kind of got my head around rape and all the sort of sexual assault things, but I just thought, for another woman to see the damage that her son had done and done nothing about it, and then try and cover it up, it did give me kind of nightmares for a few months afterwards. I've never dealt with it in the male estate. Never dealt with it, but I have in the female state. With regards the females, I have a lot to say on this subject, because it makes me very cross. Because those women put their colleagues in danger by having affairs with prisoners. Because let me tell you now, prisoners aren't in love with you. Prisoners are manipulating you to do what they want, whether that be to bring contraband in, drugs, mobiles, whether that to have sex. They are manipulating you for that. And, I'm sure you saw it, the video of D'Souza having said, well, I saw the full video. It was sent to me by one of the newspapers. And, that woman had her keys on the floor, her radio on the floor. Those two guys could have took her hostage, and other staff could have got injured by trying to save her. And after that incident, when it all hit the headlines and it was on every news channel and in every paper, the many, many hard, decent, honest, working female prison officers at Wandsworth got a really hard time from prisoners. Come on in, miss, you're next. When can we have it off on video? All this sort of thing, really like misogynistic comments to them. And they don't deserve that. These people do so much damage. If you're two officers on a landing with 120 prisoners, there's just two of you, and one of them is having sex or a relationship or bringing contraband in for a prisoner, and you have an argument with that prisoner, is this one going to have your back? No, they're not. Contraband, the bane of my life. Well, look, we had a thing with mobile phones and drugs. When I first went into security, I think our drug rate was something like around about 32% of prisoners were tested positive for drugs. And following, we used to get maybe 20, 30 parcels a day coming over the wall, and that's the ones that we got. And they were picked up by trusted prisoners known as red bands, who used to clean the grounds, staff, Who knows? But I was walking around the perimeter one day and I had a dead pigeon fall at my feet. And I was with another security officer and I made him pick it up. And inside, this dead pigeon had all been hollowed out and it was stuffed full of drugs. We had tennis balls come over with drugs in them because we had drug dogs. So they used to throw tennis balls because they thought, well, nobody will notice because we've got the dogs and they're always playing out with their tennis balls. So we had those. Everybody knows about drones now. Thankfully, when I was at Scrubs, we didn't have drones. But what we did have was these packages coming over. And I thought that, I don't know how I thought it. One night I went home, I was sat there in the bath thinking about the drug rate, because the drug rate is very important, because the higher the drug rate, the more violence, the more self-harm, the more suicides, the more bullying you will have in your jail. And I was thinking, how could we combat all these? Because it's in an inner city, it's in West London, Wormwood Scrubs, as are many prisons. So I kind of thought, well, I'm going to net the jail. So I walked in the next morning and I said to my deputy, Mick, I want you to find out a bird netting place that can net the jail. And he looked at me and he went, are you sure, boss? And I was like, absolutely, I've had this idea. And he was like, oh, for fuck's sake, not another one. Long story short, within 6 to 8 months, we had netting up and the whole jail was netted. The birds could fly under it, but they couldn't. The parcels got caught in the netting, and then we'd get the cherry picker and go and take them out, and prisoners couldn't get them. And our drug rate went from 32% down to about 4.6%, literally in a month. And of course, that's great. But when you shut one door, you know another one's going to open. And the first one that prisoners are going to look at is staff, whether that be prison officers or education staff, nursing staff, whatever. So obviously, it could even be the courts. We had the courts staff. Court would bring in drugs in. We've had the police allowing prisoners to go have nookie with their partner and then bring drugs in after we'd warned them. That's another story. But yeah, so, I held a whole load of meetings with staff to tell them, you have to be aware of manipulation. You have to be aware of the pressure that will now be on you, because we have stopped a route of drugs coming into the jail. And, it worked until some prisoners set fire to it. And then I had all the netting changed to fireproof. They put a fireproof spray on it all, so it didn't burn. So that stopped that, and they mended the hole in the net. But prisoners are ingenious. We did have one amazing way that, I had to kind of discipline this prisoner, but I was just amazed at what they did. I was on the ones on D Wing, and I had a phone call from the Fours Landing, and it was a guy called Steve, who sadly has passed away now, but he was a great character. And he said, boss, can you come up here? I've found something I think you'll be interested in. So I went upstairs, and he says, come into cell, I think it was 46 or 47 on the Fours Landing. And I said, right, Steve, what am I looking at? And he said, that. And I was like, this, that. And then suddenly the sun just caught this bit of fishing wire that was attached to the top of the window. And this wire went from Wormwood Scrubs prison over the 12-foot high prison wall with barbed wire up to the top of Hammersmith Hospital, the very top where only security could go. And it was literally like what do they call those? Like a zip line. And the people outside used to zip line parcels down this zip line into this guy's cell. That was before the netting. I just clarify that. Don't ask me how they got it up there. Don't ask me how, because there's Wormwood Scrubs, a 12-foot high wall with barbed wire. Then there is a road. Then there is Hammersmith Hospital. I think it's the Rosie Clinic, where it's a maternity clinic. And then up again is the top of Hammersmith Hospital. The prisoner whose cell it was denied all knowledge of it, but I did give him kudos for his incredible feat. Okay, so we knew that there was a solicitor, we believed, was bringing drugs into Scrubs. We'd had some intelligence from one of our sources, and so my intelligence officer did some work around this prisoner's solicitor. She had got headed paper from a genuine solicitor, a solicitor's letter, etc. So he did some work around it, and he found out that this woman had nothing to do with the solicitors. They had no idea who she was, and were quite affronted that she was saying that she was from them, actually. So we set up this thing. We knew she was due in, I think it was a Wednesday evening, on a legal visit to visit this prisoner. And we had quite a good relationship working with the local Hammersmith police. And we had a really good police liaison officer that liaised between the police and the prison. And he arranged for a WPC and a PC to attend the jail. And I arranged for my intelligence guys, the drugs dogs, to be waiting around the corner for when she came in the jail. So she came around the jail. She put her briefcase, etc., through the X-ray machine. She had really bad BO, which struck me as like, wow, this solicitor has really bad BO. Anyways, and then we put her through the drug dog, and the drug dog sat, boom. And then out sort of jumped the WPC and the PC, and we arrested her. And the WPC said to me, I'd like to strip search her. Here, have you got a room? And I said, yes. And she said to me, will you come in? Because obviously the male PC couldn't go in. And so one of my staff was hanging about. So I said, oh, Donna, can you help the WPC strip this woman? It still makes me laugh to this day. She laughs about it now. I'm still friends with her, but off the WPC, and Donna went with this woman who was claiming to be a solicitor. And then, I don't know, 10 minutes later, Donna came out white as a sheet with her search gloves on, with a carrier bag like this dangling. And I said, you're right, Donna. She went, boss, I cannot believe you sent me in there. This woman has a fanny like a clown's pocket. She said, we've got mobiles, we've got heroin, we've got a 9-bar of cannabis. And it was all in this carrier bag shoved up this woman. Anyway, she was arrested. I think she got about 7 years, because it was also found that she'd attended Belmarsh, high security estate, Manchester, high security estate, and I think Wakefield, high security estate. 3 other high security prisons pretending to be a solicitor. She wasn't a solicitor at all. She was just a drugs mule that had been used by all these drug dealers in these prisons, but we caught her. Okay, spooning. Right, spooning, it's kind of an equivalent to rape, really. Female prisoners do it, male prisoners do it. And if there is a prisoner that goes on a visit and other prisoners believe that he's going to receive drugs on this visit, and he doesn't share them, or they feel that he's got drugs on him, they get a plastic spoon and they fish around for them in various places. Obviously, there are 2 places on a woman and 1 place on a man. It's pretty much. I mean, it's pretty much rape. I mean, it's with an implement, and I've known it cause quite significant damage. But yeah, it's all to do with drugs. They'll be held down, and somebody will be fishing around for drugs concealed internally. When people say to you, "Have you got any regrets?" That's probably the worst regret that I have. We had a prisoner who was an armed robber. He was serving 10 years for armed robbery. And we had some information that he may try to get out to hospital to facilitate an escape. Anyways, this one day I got a phone call. It was at lunchtime. And it was from the orderly officer. Now, the orderly officer is a principal officer, and he is in charge of the day-to-day running of the jail, the regimes, that sort of thing, and staffing. And he said to me, "I've got a prisoner on," it was E-wing. That was it, E-wing. And he's writhing around, or pretending to writhe around in agony. And the doctor says he's got to go out. So I said, "Who's the prisoner?" And he said the prisoner's name. And I said, "I'm sure that name rings a bell with me. Just hang on a minute, I'll phone you back." Rang down to the security officer. I said, "Can you tell me any information we've got on whatever he was called?" And the officer I spoke to said, "Yeah, we've got an information that he's trying to get out to hospital. He's going to try and get out to hospital to possibly facilitate an escape." I said, "Okay." So I got back to Andy, who it was, and I said, "We think he's going to try and get out to hospital to facilitate an escape." So the doctor, I said, "I want to speak to the doctor." I happened to be duty governor that day, and the doctor was adamant that he was going out to hospital, that there was something wrong with him, that he was writhing around in agony, complaining of stomach pains. And I said, "Look, we've got this information that he's going to try and get out to hospital." No, doctor said, "I don't care. He's got to go out to hospital." And in a jail, life has to take precedence. And in part, I can understand his thinking, because if the prisoner had, died and he refused to send him out, then it would have all gone back on him. But obviously, he looks at a prisoner as a patient. I look as a prisoner as a prisoner. And so I went to my boss and I said about it. And I said, "I've got a really bad feeling about this." And she said, "Sign the risk assessment. We'll send 3 staff." I said, "I'll ring the local police. I'll contact our police liaison. We'll see if there's anything else we can do. I'll ring the hospital security," which I did. The police said they were far too busy. They couldn't send anybody, but they might send a car past. Great. I sent 3 staff out. One of them was handcuffed to the prisoner. The ambulance came. Even the ambulance people said to the doctor, "We think he's making it up." But he was still adamant that he was to go out to hospital. So out he went. And then 10 minutes later, because bearing in mind, Scrubs is right next door to Hammersmith A&E. 10 minutes later, I got a phone call from my control room that said, "We've just had a phone call from one of the staff at the hospital. Such and such has, the ambulance was crashed into by another car. Guys got out with a gun, held the ambulance people up, held the staff up, and such has escaped." They told the ambulance woman to open the back door, pointed the gun at the officers, particularly the one who was handcuffed to the prisoner, said, "Who's got the key?" He said, "I haven't got it. I'm just handcuffed to it," because you never have the key with the handcuff. And the other officer who was in charge of the escort said, "I've got the key. I'll undo it." So they undid the officer's one, so he still had one handcuff on him. And off they went. So myself and my boss literally threw our keys down the chute in the gate and ran to the hospital to see the staff. And when we got there, the ambulance woman who'd had a gun held to her was in pieces on the floor. The security guy who'd run out, who'd also had a gun held to him, was in pieces on the floor. The three staff could barely speak. They were so traumatized. And, obviously there was a big investigation, and it was all sort of, I think the doctor lost his job because he just wouldn't take advice even from the ambulance crew. And he got quite shirty with me about the fact that I was questioning his authority, and I wasn't. I was just trying to, appease everybody, I suppose. But the long and the short of it is, these sorts of things, nobody knows until you've had a gun held to your head what it feels like. Nobody can preempt how you're going to react. So of the three staff, my staff, one was regraded from an officer to an admin role. Never had prisoner contact again. One of them was medically retired from the prison service, couldn't work in a jail again. And the third one committed suicide. And, that haunts me to this day, that, we sent that ambulance out. And I believe I did everything I possibly could, but it still wasn't enough, and, I just really still feel for the staff that were involved, not only my three staff, but for the ambulance woman, whatever happened to her, and the security guys at Hammersmith Hospital that were all involved in it. That was pretty much caused by a very devious prisoner. I mean, he got a life sentence on top of his 10 years for burglary. They never found the two guys that held the staff up. Never found them. And he obviously didn't dob them in. And I think that's probably why he got such a high sentence. It's easy to become very complacent in a jail, but especially when I became a governor, my job on a daily basis was managing the risk. And there are always those who will try and take advantage in the strongest possible way, which he clearly did. Our prisons are overcrowded. The fact that many prisons are old Victorian prisons, 200 plus years old, that are holding like 3 times what they're supposed to. The fact that, we have escapes like the Daniel Khalif from Wandsworth underneath the bread van, the security of our jails, the assaults on staff, 10,500 assaults on staff by prisoners for up to November last year. That's just ridiculous. That shows, the figures are there. The figures do not lie. When you've got those sorts of figures, the amount of drugs, a third of a prison testing positive for drugs. Well, that's just outrageous. We've got people who aren't on drugs going out drug addicts. Probably 2 things. One is the MBE, and one is the writing of the book for because my years in the prison service gave me the material to write my book. I had a friend called Amanda Brown, who was a doctor at Wormwood Scrubs at the same time as me. And she emailed me out of the blue one day and said, look, I've been asked to write a book about my time in prison. And I said, all right. She said, I've got a ghostwriter. She's going to come over and she wants to come over with me because I need you to help me with a few of the operational sides of things of the prison. So I said, yeah, no problem. I said, come up to me in Saffron Walden and we'll have lunch, we'll have a chat and I'll help you where I can. So she came up with her ghostwriters, Ruth, and Ruth, Amanda and I sat down for lunch. I think we were there like 4 hours. And at the end of it, Ruth said to me, oh, Vanessa, I'd love to write your story. And I was like, absolutely not. No, thank you. Not me. No, wrong person. And she said, well, just let me have your email address. Just let me, so I can keep in touch with you. I said, yeah, whatever. Anyways, every sort of like couple of months, she'd email me and said, have you changed your mind yet? Have you changed? And she kind of wore me down. And in the end, I thought, well, actually, it'd be quite nice, I suppose, to have something that you've written that's there now forever. And I agreed to it. And it took us about 18 months because she lived in Amsterdam and I lived, in Saffron Walden. And so we used to sort of cross thing and Zoom and phone calls and everything. And I said, the only thing I say is that it's got to be the truth. I don't want no made up bits to make it sound even juicier. And if I don't like something you've put in, I'm taking it out. And so she said, okay, that's fair. So between us, we got there. Incredibly proud. I mean, I was shocked. I don't think I've ever known anybody who's had an MBE or an OBE or whatever. Anyways, OBE is other buggers' efforts. MBE is my bloody efforts. Just put that out there. But no, I mean, I was incredibly proud, and I am a royalist. I love some of the royal family, particularly the Queen. And I'd never met the Queen. I met Princess Anne, another one that I admire because she's very hardworking and she's done a lot for prisons, for the Butler Trust, etc. So I've met her a couple of times. But yeah, I mean, what's not to like? What's not to be proud of? I was proud of it. I still am. And, I kind of, I don't know, I was shocked by it, but over the years, I've kind of got my head around it. Oof, gosh, that's a good question. I just like them maybe to be a bit more open-minded about prison and what prison is for and how we treat prisoners. It's not all doom and gloom. I mean, read my book. There are lots of funny things, when you're working with people, every day is different. But yeah, maybe don't judge a book by its cover. The next 10 years, God willing, I'm here. I'd like to see a change with the prison service. I'd like to go on TV or radio or any of the other stuff that I do. And I'd like to either write or say a positive thing about the prison service and how much it's improved. That's what I would like. I would like to see our recidivism rate come right down. I would like to see prisoners going out with something to build towards and not just think that crime is the answer. That's what I would like.